Fragments of silicon, guaranteed not to be a new cryptocurrency.
Good morning and welcome to another installment of the Fragments of Silicon's European Interviews. Joining us this week is Barry Meade of Fireproof Games.
Hello there.
Yeah, right. So let's get into it. We like to start by getting to know the people behind the game, behind the studio, whatnot. And we like to ask them, for starters, what got you interested in video games both on a personal and a professional level?
Well, when I was young, when I was a kid, my parents bought me and my brother a Commodore 64, and that was our first introduction to games, really. Obviously, before that, we'd played around with older, very old consoles like the Ataris, but this one we actually owned and had in our house, and that was my first exposure to video games, really, and I immediately loved them. But I didn't really get into them properly until years later. I always wanted to be a comic artist when I was a kid, and my whole life was geared towards artwork, basically. And when it came time to come to college, I went to an open day at a college in Dublin that was doing a course on computer animation and graphics, and it was the first one in Ireland, and it was part of a very well-known animation school in Ireland called Ballyfermot. And I just thought it was the most amazing thing ever. I was totally in love with comics, computers, and music at that stage, and it would just seem like the most amazing course to do. But I went on that course and did it for about a year, and then when we were breaking up for the summer, this guy came to the university and said, look, I need to hire someone for the year. I've started a games company in Dublin. This is in Dublin, Ireland, I should say, where I'm from. I've started a games company and I need an intern to come and work for the summer and help us do some graphics. And I applied for the job, not expecting to get it because I was only a first year, but I did get it in the end. And then that was really my first professional peek into video games. And as part of that, I got an Amiga computer to take home, and then that just reignited my whole love of video games all over again. So it was a Commodore Amiga and a Commodore 64 were really my gateway drugs. And then since then, I never looked back. I've just basically worked in video games since I was 21 years old. And then after that company in Ireland, I worked there for about 2 years. I moved to, I applied for a job in my favorite games company in the world, which was Bullfrog Productions in the UK. And I got that job. So I went to work here in Guildford, and I'm still here in Guildford 25 years later, but now with my own company.
Wow. What did you work on at Bullfrog?
I was kind of like a second or third wave of the people that were in the company. So I came in just before Theme Park was released. The first game I worked on in earnest was Magic Carpet. I did a lot of work on that. I was the main designer on that, and also did some graphics. And then I worked on a bit of Dungeon Keeper, a lot of Syndicate Wars, and a whole bunch of others, really. In Bullfrog, there was set teams, but there was also people who worked on everything, and I was kind of one of those people. But my main job there morphed from art into level design. So I was head of the level design department for Bullfrog for 2 years, whatever. So yeah, a lot actually.
I must admit, some of those games bring back memories, like Magic Carpet. Dungeon.
Yeah, man, that was awesome. It was like just as the Pentium was coming out, right? So 3D was a real thing on PC. Yeah. And I remember walking in there for the first time, seeing a Pentium 90 running Magic Carpet, which obviously then was a very different game to the one that came out, but it still had this 3D landscape you were flying over, which I just thought was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. So, yeah, it was really exciting. It was great times and a fantastic company to work for.
There are some things I do miss from the 90s. But anyway, moving ahead, what did you do after Bullfrog?
After Bullfrog, well, Bullfrog got bought out by EA, and that sort of instigated a lot of change in the company. And it kind of was the writing was on the wall almost as soon as they bought the company that the company was going to change, if not sort of, fall apart really. Myself and a couple of my friends were the first to leave, which was not taken very well. But then within a year, almost everyone else had left the company of consequence, including Peter Molyneux. So, but nonetheless, so after that, we went to work for some various different companies in the UK, none of which are about, so probably not worth going into. And I've spent about 10 years then working in different games companies all over the country. I lived for a year in Liverpool. I lived for a year in Stockton-on-Tees. But every other year I've been here in Guildford working for one company or another. Also, Bullfrog spawned a lot of companies itself where people, veteran staff left Bullfrog to form their own companies. And I was involved with one of those, which was Mucky Foot. And we made Startopia and... which is a PC classic. Check it out, folks. And Urban Chaos and a couple of other games. I worked for Iguana UK on Shadow Man. Wow. Quite a bunch of different stuff really over the time. But then I think I was always working as a designer in those places. And although I love design, games design, it was at a time when designers really didn't have any responsibility or rather they had all the responsibility but no power. So if games were rubbish and you're a designer, it wasn't a very well formed job in the industry. The industry then rotated around artists and coders, and everything else was kind of secondary. Whereas as a designer, you were always on the forefront of responsibility, but you never had the power to change anything or make decisions. So it was a really frustrating job to be in, and I jumped around from place to place, probably not doing very good work for a long time, and I felt I need to change this up. So I decided to go back to doing artwork. But of course, I had stopped doing artwork in the 2D days. So I was always a pixel pusher, and an animator doing pixel art. And so I had to learn 3D basically around 2006. This was, sorry, let's see, this would have been in 1997. 98. I basically took a year off and taught myself how to use 3D Studio Max and built a portfolio of characters, and then got a job in Criterion Studios, who make Burnout, as a character artist. But I very soon went on to the environment team, which is what I ended up doing for the next 5 years there.
Wow. What Burnout games did you work on?
I came in at the tail end of Burnout 3. So the ones that I was there start to finish was Burnout 4 and Burnout Paradise. Wow. And that basically, those games. And I also worked on Black, the shooter that they made. So I actually built the... let me just think about Black. Black was started by, they built a tech demo which they took to GDC and showed to loads of journalists, and the journalists loved it. But I had built a lot of the graphics for that. I built the characters, the guns, some of the environments for that tech demo, and then went on back onto Burnout. And then a year or two later, when Black was in full production, came back on to be a lead lighting artist on a couple of the levels there. So we spent a lot of time in Criterion, and the 6 founders of Fireproof met working there on Burnout, and that's where we all sort of congealed as a team. We were all basically the senior environment artists for Burnout. So we built and designed all of the tracks for Burnout 4 and Burnout Paradise. And that was kind of our forging moment, I suppose. We went through such hell to get those games out that we felt like we'd seen and done it all, and so we felt, and because we had a lot of responsibility, we kind of ran our own team within Criterion. We felt like a team when we left, if you know what I mean. Even though we weren't, we were just employees, but we were very close. We worked really well together. We all had very similar tastes. We wanted the same things, and we had very high standards. And so we felt when we left Criterion that we could go out as freelance artists and do good work and maybe get a name for ourselves. And so that's what we did eventually.
Right. And how did Fireproof Games come about from the forging of this team?
Well, at the time, Video games was becoming, from the growth of the very start, from when I started back in the early 90s, all the way up to when we left Criterion in 2008. Video games had changed and obviously become much bigger, much more successful. There was a lot more money in it. Teams had grown to just enormous sizes. I mean, in Bullfrog, we had 45 people working on probably 5 or 6 different games. And in Criterion, we had 45, 50 people working on one game for 2 years. And even that was a small team compared to most teams at the time. But what happened was that freelance work began to become much more a part of the creation process. So whereas a team, internal team, would do everything, you began to get this idea that work was farmed out. So what that meant was that in order to save money, more and more freelance people were being brought in to work on teams, and that work that would have been done in-house was being farmed outside. And you also then got the teams began to be broken up, right, where you would have individuals within a team would be taken off one game, which they might have worked on for years and be very attached to, and then just shoved into another team to help them out. And so we really worried after when EA came along and bought Criterion, just like they did with Bullfrog, and we worried after a year or so, we had worried that our team was going to get broken up in a similar way. We just didn't want that to happen. And we thought our time in Criterion was really done. We'd worked very, very hard there. We were really proud of the games we made, but it was in lots of ways a horrible place to work. Not because of the people. The team were amazing and the games we made were amazing, but it was just a very badly run place. And so we thought, like, we're done here. What can we do? And we just sort of started thinking about what could we do to support ourselves. We thought about for a while, we had thought about the idea of maybe going to another company just as a team, and like going over to a Ubi or something like that and saying, look, hire all 6 of us for your environment team. We're really good. And so we thought about that. But then we sort of arrived at the idea that maybe we should just go out on our own and try and form a freelance art studio and then hire our own selves out as artists. But there was a kind of a logic to it, though, because when we were making Burnout Paradise, which was a very big game, and we used a lot of freelance help to get the game done, we had some really good freelance artists come and work with us in-house. And these people were technically great, artistically great, but what they lacked that we had was they weren't designers, right? They weren't game creators in a sense. They were artists. And that they were there to do that job and that job alone, and they did that well. But we couldn't bounce ideas off them. We couldn't come up with stuff with them like we could amongst ourselves. So what we thought was, if we left Criterion and started our own company as a freelance artists, we could sell ourselves as people who know how to make video games, not just art, right? So that we know how to research and design whole sections of video games. That is, we could approach a company, say, who was making another racing game and say, look, you don't have to give us the lampposts and the dustbins and the widgets to build. Why don't you give us the whole track and not only give us the work, we'll actually design it all for you. So it was a different model of outsourcing. It was a sort of creative outsourcing where we plugged directly into the team, the in-house team, right, and did the same kind of heavy lifting design and creative work that the in-house teams typically did. And we were pretty much the first people I knew for sure who'd ever offered that as a freelance service. And it was based on the fact that we'd already made a bunch of really successful, high quality games together. So we knew we could do the work. We just had to persuade other people that we could do this very sensitive work that teams are very reluctant to give out to unknown people. In lots of ways, because it's the most fun part, right? The creative aspect of making a video game is the bit that all the in-house teams love. They want to give out the lampposts and the dustbins and the random tree models. That's the kind of stuff they want to give out to other people. But we didn't want to do that work because we felt like we're underselling ourselves. We have so much more to offer. And so, yeah, we tried that. We basically formed Fireproof Studios, got a tiny office, burnt out our savings getting an office. We borrowed money from a local company to buy PCs. So it was very hand to mouth, very rough and ready startup. We absolutely did not know how to start a business or run a business. And I would argue we still don't today. We're really just games people, right? That's all we really know. It's all we're really good at. But our first year was difficult, man. We really had to try and sell the idea of giving responsible in-house work to an out-of-house crew. And it took time to persuade people. And our first year in business was very difficult. but we made it. We made it through. So yeah, that's pretty much how it started.
And what games did you work on in terms of art sourcing?
The first big one we worked on was Little Big Planet. The team Media Molecule are all they're basically all my old friends who run that company, and they had said to us when we were starting up, hey, look, we need help. If you guys can get set up quickly enough, we'll probably be able to give you some work. So that was one of the impetus for us to get going, and they actually lent us the money to buy some PCs so we could start doing work for them. So that relationship lasted as long as we were doing freelance work. I mean, we did work for them pretty much nonstop for the next 5 years. But we also worked on a bunch of other games. We worked on a couple of Killzone games. We worked on a bunch of driving games, such as Blur. And then we did a lot of other smaller things. We did our first foray into mobile graphics, which we'd never done before. We started doing other sort of... we went through a lot. We did almost every style of art under the sun. We did a lot of work for... DJ Hero, don't know if you remember that game.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so we designed an awful lot of designed and built all their backdrops for them, and like all the environments, and we also did a lot of their decks that featured in the game. We did a lot of work for those guys. They were great to work with. And then lots of other sort of smaller jobs, which probably aren't worth recounting. But what it meant was we went from a team that was used to only building realistic environments of streets and roads for racing games to a team that had tried almost every art style under the sun for almost every kind of game you can think of. So it gave us like really great experience and great founding. After the first year, our next 5 years or 4 years in freelance was pretty solid. We were never really out of work after that. We knew that once we built a rep, we'd probably be okay. You know, once people had worked with us a bit and they found our work to be really good, that we would get more work, and that turned out to be the case. We never really lost any clients once we'd gained them. So we didn't make a lot of money because we didn't charge a lot, and there was only 6 of us. But we did do good work and kept ourselves paid and kept a roof over our heads. So we were happy enough with that.
And so the question that beckons is, what prompted the crossover from doing art outsourcing to, making your own games?
Yeah, well, look, this is easy. Right from the get-go, when we started Fireproof, we had said, as soon as we get enough money in the bank, we're going to make our own video game. So that was always part of the plan. And that was no joke. Like, we really meant it, and we stuck to it when the time came. But different things happened to put blockers in front of that. One of them was, as I explained, we didn't make much money, and I'll tell you why. We did not want to become an art outsourcing company, right? So the way you make money in art outsourcing is the margins are very small. So the way you make money is with scale, yeah? So what you do is you start your business, get some clients up, and then you start hiring lots and lots of artists so you can take on more and more work. And in that way, you make money. Whereas what we wanted to do was to make Fireproof into a great studio before we wanted a great business, right? Which meant that we wanted to hire great people, and that's all. We didn't want to hire people just so we could take on more work, right? Just to fill a contract. Because that way we end up with like mediocre people we can't really carry when in future times when we actually go around to make our own game. I mean, think of it like this. If we had a room full of 100 people and they're all knocking out work for us, and then we wanted to convert into doing a video game, well, it might take us 6 months or a year to figure out what that game is, and what are those other 90 people going to be doing for all that time, right? We couldn't carry that kind of weight. So we kept the studio really small, really tight. We only hired stars, like really good people, and we just basically turned away work that we couldn't do, which was a lot. We turned away a lot of work because we didn't want to get into that model. We weren't an outsourcing company. What we were is a team of artists who were trying to find a way to make our own video game. And that was really the goal of the studio. So we couldn't go down that route, right? Because it would have cut us off from that goal. So Yeah, I mean that was pretty much there right from the beginning. Was as soon as we get some money, we're going to make our own video game. Now the other things that happened that put a blocker on that was it was really expensive then. I mean you're talking here now. Well, it's 2011. It was still really expensive to create anything for Xbox Live or PSN, and they were the markets we were thinking we could go for, right? Indie markets. We're an indie company.
Mhm.
We have to do small scale games for the indie market, which exists on PSN and Xbox Live. But it was still shockingly expensive to make games for those platforms at the time. Now, mobile had come along and was just beginning to rise up as a sort of a legit gaming platform. And we would have been like other people who came from PC and console. We just didn't take mobile seriously. We didn't even play any mobile games at that stage. We just had no interest. We really were console kids, and PC kids. And but we came to the realization that after 5 years of hard work and 5 years of actually never being without work, we still only had about 100 grand in the bank, which wouldn't begin to pay for the development of an Xbox or PlayStation game. So we had to take a hard look in the mirror and go, well, look, we have to do something. We can't just continue forever with this small scale outsourcing company that can never afford to build a game. So we thought, well, what about mobile? That's becoming legit. It's free to it's very cheap to develop for, very cheap to publish on. And then we also looked at it from a few different angles, such as mobile games generally were 2D, cartoony, very sort of lowest common denominator type games at the time, and they were all basically free to play, money flipping games. I mean, this is in the era of Fart Simulator and things like this, right? So, just so you know, we're not talking about the way it hasn't got to the gains it is now, and but it was becoming legit, and so we looked at it and said, there's actually some pretty good hardware here. And I remember when the Epic released their first 3D demo. Do you guys remember that? The castle one that they did?
That does ring a bell.
This was around 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
And it was not impressive in the PC or console sense, but it was certainly way more impressive than anything else that was on mobile at the time.
Right.
So we looked at that and we thought, look, we can do these kind of graphics. We've been making games. We've been making, like, if you look at something like Burnout Paradise, that's a 24-kilometer square, fully streamable, open world game, which we designed and built ourselves right from the ground up. It streams at 60 frames a second. We basically spent our entire career making really low poly but high quality artwork. So we were very in tune with the idea of doing working with in very tight limits to make good looking artwork, and that sort of suited us in mobile, right? Because that's what mobile had. It was great hardware if you knew how to use it right, and if you made the right art decisions. So we thought maybe we can do something on this, right? Like if we put a 100K, if we've got 100K in the bank, we can potentially make a game for mobile. And that 100K basically paid for us to hire one programmer to come and work for us. And what we did was we got that programmer, who's Rob, who's now our tech director, and Mark, who's our creative director. We put them into my office, and they just sat there for the next 6-7 months working full time on a game idea. And that was basically explaining the flip. It wasn't really a flip. It was always the plan. It was just that the plan that we had originally had was just not going to happen. So we had to change it up. And then suddenly we started looking at mobile, and we kind of came to the conclusion that we can do this, right? We can actually get a game out. It'll be much different to what we'd talked about and in very different circumstances, but it would be a game nonetheless. So we went for it. We hired a programmer and spent all that money on Mark and Rob to try and make a video game.
And from that was birthed The Room.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about that, how that came about. When we started, we thought to ourselves, okay, what is it about mobile that we think we can sort of engage with in a way that people haven't seen before? And like I said, the 3D hardware was one side. The other side was the touchscreen. we felt like no one was really making a game to take advantage of the touchscreen. Lots of ports from console and PC games had come over to mobile at this stage, and they were all dreadful because they all had virtual D-pads and really terrible on-screen control systems. The kind of games that you never really should have made for mobile, right? So we thought, well, why don't we go the other way, right? If we're PC and console gamers coming onto mobile, why don't we come at it from the other angle, which is try and make a completely mobile game, but that has the aspects of console and PC gaming that we really love, like high-grade art and audio and immersiveness and all these kind of things. And so that's what we did. So we said to ourselves, we have to come up with a game idea that's 100%, or at least that's very plugged into what a mobile device is and how people use it, rather than what we think it should be as snobby PC gamers, right? And so that's why we came up with the idea that we have to make something that's very tactile, that uses the touch screen as well as the 3D hardware. So we came up with a couple of different game ideas, and we basically decided on 3. And we said, what we'll do is in January, we'll make a test of one idea. In February, we'll make a test of another. In March, we'll make a test of another. And then at the end of March, we'll decide which of those 3 to take to fruition and try and finish off within a year. And so that's what we did. And in in January, we spent 4 weeks making a demo of a game, which was basically a very simple game about navigating a rocket around some planets by using the slingshot effect of gravity. It was a very simple game. It was kind of what you would expect a mobile game to be, in that it was 2D, it was cutesy graphics, very accessible, very easy to play. It was kind of cool, but one of the things it did do really well was that you used your finger to navigate this rocket across space, and also it interacted with physics, or rather a light physics simulation, to use the slingshot effect. And what that did was it felt really tactile. So it genuinely was a game that was using the touchscreen in an interesting way, and not just simply to click on things. You know, you were moving your finger around, and we thought, yeah, this is pretty good. And then the second idea that we did in February was called Puzzle Box, and the idea of this game was to recreate in 3D the actual real-life puzzle boxes that are very popular in places like China and Japan. I don't know if you guys know these. They're like basically intricate carved jewelry boxes, but instead of them just being a lock and a key, there's a bunch of different maneuvers you have to make, and they might be hidden. But they're all about manipulating an object with your fingers. And we thought that actually really suits what we're trying to do on mobile, right? Which is to get a tactile game that's about interacting with sort of high quality art that has a touch of physics to it. And so we started that game in February of 2012. And it just instantly worked, right? As soon as we got it working, within 2 weeks, we were all like, this just clicked, right? Immediately, we all knew it was a good idea. And we basically just never stopped making that idea. We never went on to the third game. We just kept making Puzzle Box until 9 months later, we rechristened it The Room and released it.
Well, why did you rechristen that as The Room instead of Puzzle Box?
I don't know. I think, well, Puzzle Box was only ever the working title. It didn't actually mean anything to us. Okay. We didn't really intend it to be called Puzzle Box. It was just the name of the project or the game idea. And also over the period, like, it's very tempting for people to think that we had everything worked out and we knew what we were doing, and we absolutely did not. We made everything up every day, right? We came into work and we just made shit up on the moment, based on how the game was playing, how it was feeling. We were just throwing in ideas. So we had no idea that we were building The Room when we started Puzzle Box, if that makes sense to you. We were just building a game about manipulating objects in the 3D world. And then over time, we started putting our own tastes into it. So the audio began to become a bit creepy. So did the visuals. The creepy side of it, the sort of horror light aspect to The Room, came about from the fact that we loved horror games, and we really wanted to make a big ass, $50 million horror game, and that's what we talked about for years, but we never got that money. So we were just all sort of in that mood, in that sort of space of thinking about horror and horror games and the immersion of them and the creepiness. And so that just seeped into the game almost like through osmosis. It really wasn't planned. So I think by the end of it, we were looking for a name that was as, I don't know, mysterious as the way we'd actually constructed the game. And the name actually came from a tech demo that the guys who started Media Molecule did when they were in Lionhead. They had made a tech demo about a little guy climbing around furniture, which went on to be Little Big Planet. But their original tech demo that they did in Lionhead was called The Room. And I had always remembered that name because the tech demo itself was filled with like beautiful wood paneling and carved ornate objects. And it sort of stuck with me that when we were making this game, which in a different way was touching on very Victorian graphics, it just seemed to suit. And I think I just said it out one day, like, why don't we just call it The Room? And everyone kind of went, oh, okay. Because, like, to be honest, we're shit at names, and we don't really know why they matter, other than you know, our view basically about naming things is the names only matter if the game is really good, and once they're really good, then the game itself fills the name with importance, if you know what I mean. So yeah. we try not to struggle too much over that, and I think we all just were sick of trying to come up with some sort of clever, arty-farty, you know, catchy name, and we just got bored of that, and so we just went. I think I just pushed it out one day and just said, "What about The Room?" And everyone went, "Yeah, okay, let's do that." And that's how it happened. But I mean, that's the game. That's what I mean. Like the game itself was really organic how it came out. It wasn't planned at all, and to this day we don't really plan out our games. We just sort of make them. We don't design. We don't do much. What would you say? Like, we don't do design documents, and we don't do loads and loads of 2D artwork or anything like this. We basically come up with an idea and we immediately start building it, and then by building it, we discover whether or not it's any good. If you know what I mean.
I think I do. Like,
yeah. And
yeah, if I'm recalling correctly, the original The Room came out in what, 2012?
Yeah.
Like, and that was about when the iPhone was starting to see like the Infinity Blade games.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, it's like the notions of what a mobile game could be were really changing.
We're beginning. That's right. They're beginning to change. I mean, at that stage, you have to remember the games industry didn't take mobile seriously at all. Right, so no one was actually putting real games on mobile, which is why all the people who are making free-to-play Facebook games, they started migrating all their stuff over to mobile, because it really was just a very powerful platform that was just left alone by the games industry. Mm-hmm. So that's why those games took off there. It wasn't necessarily because they're all great games, although some of them are. It was also because they were just, mobile was left to rot by the games industry. They just didn't understand it. It didn't have a control system that they understood. They couldn't port their games to it. So it was really kind of ignored. And so what happened after the Facebook type games took off, the free-to-play games took off, then it started to be, the industry took notice. But of course, the only way they could think of to do anything on mobile was to port some of their old games onto it. And so that's what happened. You had years of really bad ports of very naff old games appearing on mobile and just cratering. And so this left a really bad taste in the mouth of video games companies, who just then continued to ignore it. But what you had then was the new breed of developers who came out who did take mobile seriously, and they started to build real games for mobile around this time. And again, you will notice that most sort of big ticket AAA developers who make mobile games now make free-to-play games.
Well, unfortunately, that's kind of where the mobile market moved. You know, it's like the mobile market, you know, what is it dominated by? Clash of Clans, Candy Crush, you know, all of those.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise. And those are making unseemly amounts of money.
Yes, insane amounts of money, yeah.
My question to you is, how do you survive in the current market, given that, from what I understand, you know, the kinds of games that you design aren't particularly, you know, sought after in the mobile market these days?
Yeah. Well, if I mean, in terms of like percentages, they were never sought after. I mean, we don't make the kind of games that are going to go big on mobile for lots of reasons. I mean, number one of the things we did from the first room game, and we've stuck to ever since, is that we cut out all of the lower tier mobile devices. We just don't make games for anything that hasn't got powerful 3D hardware. And unfortunately, that's an awful lot of the mobile market that we lose immediately just by making the games that we do. But we do that because we otherwise can't really deliver what we think we can, what we do best. And in the sort of spirit of if you want to be successful, do what you do best. We sort of made that decision very early on, and that means that 90% of the mobile market is basically out of our hands, and we can't really deal with it. But that's fine. It's worked out great for us. Like we've had a really good success on mobile for a company of our size, so we were very happy to keep going with that, really. But yeah, although we're known as a mobile developer and we made our name in mobile, and we continue to make mobile games, we're not very invested in that whole world or that whole side of the business, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We're kind of just gamers who use mobile as a platform. We wouldn't consider ourselves, gamers of a particular type, like we're PC gamers or mobile gamers or whatever. We kind of just like all games. But a lot of the sort of mobile industry, we're not part of. Because it's all based on free-to-play games, and so every conversation you can have in the mobile industry is basically around those kinds of games. So, we're a little bit divorced from it, I guess. We make our games, and Apple and Google love our games, and people who have those devices we're very happy that they buy our games. But other than that, we're really just focused on making video games and not on the platform itself, in any sense.
Right. And on that note, the Room series has expanded to other platforms. Like, for example, for those who are watching the chat right now, you can see that we're showing some of the Room 1 here, and it's the Steam version. Cool. And indeed, the third Room game has hit the Steam platform, today?
Sorry, say that again?
The Room 3 hit Steam today, correct?
It does, yes. It's out now.
Yes. And more poignantly, you just made your console debut on the Nintendo Switch. Yep. And I want to talk about that version since, it's the first console game you've made. And first of all, what led you to choose the Nintendo Switch to debut the Room series on?
Do you mean as in, why? You mean for consoles? Why is it the first one on console?
Yes. Like, why the Room on Switch as opposed to, say, PlayStation?
Well, just to backtrack a bit, we were very nervous initially about taking it off mobile at all. So our first port of call was Steam and PC. And it took us years to put the first game on Steam because we had invested so much into the. We were just scared. I think we were scared of the reception that it would get because people on Steam could be very mean about mobile games. So we thought maybe it wouldn't go down well with the audience. We also thought that losing the touchscreen, the tactility of that would mean that we're in some way taking something out of the game for PC players, if you know what I mean. Like we're giving them a lesser version in some way. So for years, we avoided doing that at all because we were just nervous about it. Really, we didn't want to face the wrath of unhappy Steam gamers, and but eventually we bit the bullet and we did it, and it worked out really well. And all of our games, both games, Room 1 and Room 2, have overwhelmingly positive ratings on Steam, and so we were flat wrong about the reception that we thought it would get. The reason is that even if you take away the control method of the Room and you lose that sort of through the looking glass tactility sort of magic that the touchscreen gives you, it's still just a very well made, if I say so myself, adventure puzzle game. And that is something that PC users are very used to. And we didn't, so we were probably just too nervous, I think, at one stage to make that happen. And we had to go through it in order to get over ourselves, right? So we've done that. So I think approaching, excuse me, but when it came to consoles, it was the same issue again, where we thought, look, if we have to convert a game that uses one-to-one touch of either the finger or a mouse in the gameplay, if we have to convert that into using the typical control method of a console, it's going to be awful to play. So basically, we consigned ourselves. The games are never going to go on console. That's the end of that, right? Just simply by the dint of the controls being far too different. So when Switch came out, it was the first console that we kind of looked at and thought, aha, actually, this can do it. One of the room games could go on this console, right? Because number one, it's a touchscreen game. Number two, it has the nunchucks, which you can use as pointers on big screen mode. So that means both methods are one-to-one, more or less. And you can play it in a very similar style to how you would play it in mobile or on PC. So that was it, really. It was actually the unique makeup of the Switch that allowed us to put the game onto Switch. It wasn't really our decision in that way. We weren't overcoming any bravery like we were with PC. It was really the Switch itself. It was just so unique that we thought, one day we have to do this. And yeah, finally we got around to doing it.
Right, and for the Switch version, you teamed up with Team 17 to bring it over, correct?
We did, yes.
I suppose my question is, how much involvement did you have like directly with the Switch board?
It depends what you mean. I mean, we basically looked for people to help us make it because we didn't have the time to do it in-house. Mm-hmm. And then we just worked really closely with the team. We would just get regular bills to play, and we would have regular meetings, give them lots of feedback. And our Rob, our tech director, had to do a lot of work with them to get it going smoothly and fixing bugs and finding problems. But actually, it was pretty smooth, I have to say. It came out pretty well, and obviously we weren't porting the mobile version; we were porting the PC version. And the PC versions of our games are completely remade versions. Like every asset in the game is different from the mobile version, because we're PC nerds, right? And there's no way we're going to put mobile graphics into a PC game. So we had to do, all our PC ports are like ludicrously expensive, because we have to do it the right way, right? We want everything to look amazing. We want it to look high res and suitable to the hardware. So we had that version with all those souped up graphics, like completely revamped, ready to go. And we were like, yeah, let's put this on Switch. So it's a very different experience to the original mobile one. It looks way better. It's much more interesting.
That makes sense.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that makes sense. Since especially if we're talking about the first room game, this was this was made for what 2012 era.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it came out in November 2012.
And the smartphone technology has progressed leaps and bounds since then.
For sure, yeah.
And indeed, the Nintendo Switch is using much more advanced hardware.
Yeah, Android guts. Yeah.
So you'd probably, if you didn't remade it for PC, you probably would have had to do so for Switch, or somebody would have had to do it, because I imagine the original version would not have looked all that well on the Nintendo Switch.
No, I don't think so. Certainly not good enough for us, anyway. No, there's no way we would just simply port any of those games onto any other platform that isn't mobile. That just wouldn't happen. Just in terms of basic self-respect, we wouldn't do that. Never mind what it would mean in the market.
Right.
No, we've got no interest in not delivering the best we possibly can at any stage. So it had to be done the hard way. It was always only ever going to be done that way. But you're right in thinking that, for instance, if we hadn't done the PC versions, would we do the Switch version now? I don't know. Maybe the PC had to be there to be that intermediate step to get us, to sort of get help with our nerves about doing it, number one, but also just to improve the quality of the code base and the visuals, which is exactly what happened.
Well, and the game has been out on the Switch for about a month now?
Yeah.
And I suppose my question is, what's the reception been for the Switch version of The Room?
So far, pretty great. Our reviews have been cool, which is nice to see. Lots of people are getting it, and it's really nice to see people who don't know the game playing it again, because In the mobile scene, it's very well known. So, it's we don't get that same feeling of having someone see the game for the first time. It's very rare we get that feeling. And it's nice. It was nice when the Switch came out to have people just a very different sector of gaming who weren't familiar with the game. Who just to see, it's nice to see people surprised, right? And surprise is just such a huge part of success in video games. But at the same time, we're a small indie team. We don't have budgets to spend on marketing or PR, so we very much rely on the quality of our game and word of mouth to sell our games. We always have done. We've in our history, we've never spent any money on marketing or PR. We've always relied on platforms or people or word of mouth or
right, or shows like ours. Indeed. Anyway, so not sure how much you can talk about this particular question, but given.
Oh, hi. Sorry, are you cutting out?
Okay. Hopefully not. Can you hear us?
Yeah. You'd cut out there just for a second. I was just wondering, had I cut out for you?
Oh, no. Anyway.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Anyway.
Where was I?
Yeah. Well, anyway, our next question is, given the, I suppose, success of the first Room game, could you see the further Room games coming to the Nintendo Switch?
Yeah. But I mean, it's obvious. In fact, it's completely dependent on the reception. I was about to say, we as a team have a much more of a long-term view about sales, because digital sales is so much different to disc sales, which is what we were used to when we were making Burnout. Your games can continue to sell forever, effectively. And so we don't look for that rush of initial sales, which you need on a disc-based system. We look for long-term sales. So, for instance, the Room on PC probably took about a year to make its money back, maybe a bit less. I'm not sure. Like I said, they're we went all out to develop great versions, so they're very expensive to make. But that doesn't freak us out, right? We will put a game on a platform and we will wait for it to make money. That's okay as far as we're concerned. And so we're happy to see that happen on Switch. And on PC, what really mattered to us we didn't look for a burst of initial sales. We're happy as long as it hits profitability sometime. But what we really want to see is the reception from gamers. We want to see the actual players and what they think of it. The people on that platform giving us real opinions. And so Steam is great for that. The reviews gave us a lot of confidence from what our players have said. Now, the games, like I said, because we don't advertise them or do pay for PR or anything, we really do rely on those people to give us the correct feedback and give us sort of guide us really in our decisions. And so the room is, it's not out too long on Switch, but we'll just wait and see how the reaction is. We'll keep monitoring it, and if people are really happy with the game and say, you know what, this is a great game, then that's the kind of thing that will motivate us to do the second one. But yeah, ideally we'd all love to see them all on Switch. In fact, like we did have the decision to make about whether or not to bundle all three games and release them, and lots of people have said that to us. Why don't you do that? But the reality is that would have been just too expensive, too much of a risk on something that was an unknown. So we just had to take it a bit softly. So we're like, look, let's just get the first one out, see what the reaction is, see if people get the gameplay, because that's what's really important to us, is that the people on that platform understand why we made this game, what it's about, that they're tickled by the same kind of things we are, that they share the same taste as us, and that's what gives us confidence to make the next games. So that's what we're doing, and we're just monitoring it really to see what the reaction is.
Well, that's actually kind of rarefied in today's environment, just in general. Not just in terms of physical versus digital, but when it comes to Steam, for example. Steam is so big these days.
Yeah.
There's the fear that, you release a game out there and it's never going to get noticed.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We have that fear before release.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
No doubt.
But like I said, even though, it's still different for us in a way. Like, for one, we have a leg up because our game is known in the industry. generally. So, like for instance, journalists might know the game. So if we email a journalist and say, "Hey, look, this is coming out on Switch," there's a good chance the journalist will go, "Oh, I know that game. I'll check it out." So we do have those advantages that other indie teams don't have, right? We've had success in other platforms, so that's one thing. But I think also the other fact is we're prepared to wait to see the comeback, to see to hit profitability. We're prepared to wait for the game to justify itself. We don't need to see it in the first initial rush, the first few weeks or months of a release. And that's also something that other indie teams can't afford to do. So we are in a sort of a rarefied position, right? If our take on this is rarefied, it is also because of our sort of rarefied position, which is we're lucky to have, frankly. But it does mean that we can make very long-term, low-key decisions that other teams probably can't do because they don't have the money to wait, for instance, a year for a game to hit profitability. So that's how we make all our decisions, really, is like what's good for the game, what's good for the fans of the game. And they're our priorities. We don't want to make dick moves with our games, basically. We don't want to flog it off for a cheap check. I can't count. I couldn't tell you how many companies have approached us asking us to either convert our game into a license or put a license into our game or do some other game for them in the style of the room and all this kind of thing. We get those offers all the time, and we're just not interested. We just want to make our own games and hope to find an audience. That's really all it is.
That's another thing that's not too odd on the mobile scene. Like, there have been branded versions, say Angry Birds or Temple Run and what have you.
Sure, all the time.
And yeah, it's rare for a company to have the integrity to not have their franchise converted into. I don't know exactly what would work for the room.
Yeah.
Saw maybe.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who, yeah. I mean, you're in the ballpark there. Like, in terms of like the kind of movies and that kind of thing that have come at us. You're not a million miles away. But I don't know. I mean, it's the thing is we're only interested in video games. I mean, as a team, as a group, as a studio, all we care about is video games. I mean, it's like we love movies and all that. But we don't want to make movies. We've got no interest in making them. So it's very flattering to have these people come at us and offer us like big Hollywood cheeses come and talk to us and say, "Hey, we want to work with you." But we're like, yeah, that's cool and all, but we kind of just want to make our game and bye. That's pretty much how it goes. The thing is, like, we worked hard to get into this position, and It sort of boggles my mind that so many studios, when they finally get into this position, they work so hard to get, then they immediately change up their goal into something else, and then they sort of destroy what they've just built in order to try and do something else. And I think we just look at it as a bit more like, no, we're really lucky right here. We're totally independent. We have nobody to answer to, like zero, because we've never taken a check from anybody. This is exactly how we want to work, right? We want to come into work every day and do exactly what we want, exactly how we want, and go home again at night and not work, not kill ourselves trying to do it. And as soon as we have a master, right, which is what other people's money gives you, all of that goes out the window, right? We have to start talking about deadlines. We have to start planning everything. We have to send out, we have to do documents, tons of meetings, all the stuff that we hate doing. As it stands, we're able to make our own games our own way and go home happy at 6 o'clock every night without killing anybody. And we're successful. So I would, our view is, what else is there? What on earth do you want over and above this, right? As a games creator, what possibly better setup could you have other than, a Ferrari outside and a fucking heart attack? Because that's what you get.
I guess that would come down to the individual company. Like, it's like, and I would. This is not to say we don't want Ferraris, right? We're all for money. We're all for success. We're absolutely up there, and like we all want that to happen. It's just there are different ways to do that, and you don't necessarily have to take the ones that come at you first, right? The thing is that, like, so many other companies,
You know, I've been around long enough to know that so many companies fail trying to do this kind of expansion, right? It's exactly the point when they're successful is when they start to go downhill, right? And the sort of the writing is on the wall for them, and then 2 years later they bust and that's that. And it is this constant chase for other people's influence or other people's money, or whereas all we're attuned to is games and gamers. We don't really care about the opinion of other people outside of that industry. You know, if we want to be remembered for anything, it's that we've made classic games, right? That would be our goal, right? To sort of live up to the heroes that we look up to be counted on the same table as those people. That's our goal. But what people tend to forget generally is that goal also is a goal to huge success, right? If we think about all the people that we know that have created the best games in the world, they're all bloody successful. So I don't really understand why you have to go into free-to-play games or whatever in order to do that, right? There's all roads lead to Rome, right? There's many paths you can tread. It's just that everybody seems to be treading the same one at the moment, and that just seems to be disastrous as far as we could see. You know, we're just putting ourselves into a competitive lane with a million other developers now, and we're just not that interested. Right now, we have our own lane, and no one fucks with us. So our whole idea is what is the best environment to create video games, brand new, original video games from, and it is to have conditions that are untouched, right, where you're unmeasured by outside forces. And so that's what we're doing, and that's what we're trying to keep. So we're very slow to do things like ports. We're very slow to release games. We're very private. We're not a very public-facing company, right? We're not constantly telling people about the games that we're working on. We want to be kind of left alone in a lot of ways, to just make video games and then let our work speak for us, right? And people, if they have questions about what we do and what we think, and our work should say almost everything for us, and then everything after that is gravy, right? But all we want is to make games that we like and be successful that way. We don't want the complications of heart attacks, Ferraris, and Dead by 50, right? That's not we're not interested in that.
Well, once again, it seems like a simple question, but some of it comes down to, you know, what kind of game are you developing? Like, I suppose to cite an example, say Ninja Theory, or you know, they were on a quest to make the AAA indie game, and you know, they seem to be successful with Hellblade. But on the other hand, they also wanted the stability that came with the Microsoft money. So, you know, the path to making great games isn't a singular one.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah,
I mean, look how we did it, right? We did freelance work on one. One half of the office is doing freelance work while the other half is working on original games. So we absolutely recognise that. It's often it is a bunch of different things that you're doing. I should just mention I have to go now, so this will have to be the last question. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that.
So
there is no one way to do it for sure. It's just that everyone, I think, once you're successful, there's an expectation that you should be getting in line with the way that everyone else does it, right? But we try not to do that unless it actually makes sense to us.
Right. And indeed, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Yeah, I know we were having a great conversation.
Yeah, man, I'd love to do it again, right? Keep going.
Yeah. I mean, well, whenever you're ready to talk about your new game, we'll have you on the program.
Cool.
Also, we're hoping to review The Room 3 if you have any review codes for Steam.
Sure. Yeah, I can sort you out with those as well.
Okay, thank you. We usually ask for 4 because that's how many people on the review team, but whatever you can spare.
Yeah, we can do that. No problem.
All right. So that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. If you'd enjoyed today's broadcast, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you'll be notified when we go on air again. And on that note, tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. is our main show. We've had some guest shufflings there, so instead we will be talking about the Kingdom Hearts franchise solely.
God help us all.
We could probably spend 6 hours just trying to burrow through the lore of Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
On that note, we will wish you good gaming.